So we're going to be talking about Dave and Sanjin are going to dive into this AI disconnect. And Dave and I were just scratching the surface why most enterprise AI fails to deliver revenue. Because again, we kind of set up a lot's going on in AI, Sanjin, but your company, other companies have been saying that AI isn't working all the time. And so wanted to dive into that. So Dave, I'm going to let you two take it from here. Perfect. And then I'll be back with Kathy Johnson to kind of talk about some of the success factors she's seeing. So Dave, over to you.
Perfect. Okay. So look, I could not be more excited to be having this conversation. And for all of you, again, I think we have, like I said, well over 1,000 people in live streaming right now. So this is a pretty good, pretty well attended event so far. Let me give a little background. Let me tell you why I'm so excited about this. So Sanjin is one of the most interesting humans alive. And everybody says it, but let me give some context and some background. And I know you laugh because you can't see the forest through the trees. When you're it's like, oh, it's just my journey. So you taught yourself. So Sanjin taught himself to program when he worked in basically a small, he lived on a small island growing up during the Balkan conflict. And I mean, I think you told, your village was like 120 people. And so you go from that to getting an MBA from Yale. So that journey basically turned you into one of what I would say, the world's experts in designing and understanding AI. And so you then are now a partner at Bain, and you are the AI kind of lead product expert at Bain. So you're consulting with some of the largest organizations on planet Earth and helping them deploy AI strategies, deploy AI solutions, and also avoiding some of the stuff that we were talking about around how to avoid, some of these failures. So I guess, thank you for joining us. You're doing this for free. This is just you out of the goodness of your heart, kind of giving back to the community. So thank you for joining us.
You're too kind. I'm honored to be here and excited to have a fun conversation.
So let's jump in. First off, again, there's lots of things I would love to go down, but tell us, first off, what is it that there's so many things I want to go down. First, tell us, I guess, a little bit about what are the things you're doing right now? What do you what are your current kinds of projects?
So it's actually almost kind of interesting to talk about how the projects have changed over the last 2 years since that ChatGPT moment in November of 2022. The first year or two, it was a lot about let's strategize where to do it. Let's do a lot of proof of concept. Let's see what works. This is so exciting. We're all trying to learn together what works. And then about last summer, there was a big kind of vibe change where it went from let's do cool things with tech to show me the money. How can this actually create tangible value that I can point to with my finger for my organization? So specifically, I help on all things customer. Sometimes that's the front of the house, kind of marketing and sales. Some of that it's when they're customers, it's customer success, customer support, things of that nature. So a lot of the projects that we're doing are projects that have a clear and tangible way in which doing this will result in this decrease in cost or this kind of increase in revenue. And we're building full on workflows or AI agents to make that happen.
Okay, so I got to pause you because you just dropped a bunch of knowledge here that's kind of interesting. So the first thing you did is you're focusing on outcomes. So a lot of these AI projects that we're hearing about are more task oriented, let me automate some content creation. And you're not doing that. What you're saying is there's got to be one of two kinds of outcomes. So explore that just a teeny bit.
Yeah, so the biggest kind of divide in outcomes that we're seeing is people are conflating the technology works and it saves me some time and I actually get to see a top line or bottom line impact, right? The big, mental gap people need to get over is time saved does not equal money saved or money earned, right? So it may be that content generation as a use case is something we are doing, and it is, but you also have to pair it with really, really intelligent way of how you deploy it, right? First, you want that content engine to generate the right kind of stuff. The worst kind of content engines, and I've seen a lot of them, is they generate stuff, but it's generic. It's not really grounded in what your company's doing. It's not appropriately personalized or tailored for what you need to do it. And you actually end up where like people are using, it takes them more time to generate content because now they have to kind of like edit this content that came from AI that actually if they just started from scratch, it would have been faster. But let's say they even have the technology that works. You really have to be honest with yourself. Do I actually want it to generate more revenue, or am I using this to lower cost? And you cannot do both at the same time, right?
Okay. You got to just like, let's highlight that. You cannot. So first off, your AI initiative, again, it can generate content. It can send emails. It can do whatever. It has to have a defined outcome. So again, if you're taking notes and you're watching, first thing, make sure your initiative has one of those two objectives. And then your journey to get there is fine. Like however you have to get there. The second thing you just said, though, is it cannot do both. And there have been so many of our clients who've said, okay, I need to drive both revenue and I need it to be cheaper. Does that work?
Not at the same time as a single use case, no. And actually, this content generation is a perfect thing. First, it's like the very first thing these foundational models were good for, right? If you think about the first wave of AI companies like the likes of Jasper, they're the ones to figure out how to get like good copy out of GPT-3 class large language models. So if you take the content generation as an example, let's say it can do the work just as well as humans can do today, with some oversight probably. The way to save money is to say, cool, I'm going to create the same amount of content as I did before. I not need fewer humans to do it. But that means you're actually going to have to like either let some people go or repurpose them to do something else in order to save cost. And a lot of people are really not willing to take that second part. If you want to take that use case for more revenue, what are you going to say? No, I'm going to have the same number of people today. They're going to generate 5x, 10x more content. And as a result, I'm going to have like more tailored, more personalized content for more like micro segments of people that I go after. And as a result, I'm going to be far more effective in my sales. But you cannot do both.
Can't do both.
It's not about the use case. It's about how you deploy it that the decision is made.
And we're seeing, oh, I cut you off. Keep going.
No, go ahead.
So, I mean, there's so much here because you've had so much practical and pragmatic experience. You did, when we were talking beforehand, you shared this analogy that I really liked around, if you remember, around steam power versus electricity. Yeah. And like, what does that mean in terms, like, how does that reflect what we should be thinking about AI initiatives and projects?
Yeah. So the famous story here is at the turn of the 20th century and kind of into the 30s, a whole bunch of companies, manufacturing companies, realized like, look, electricity is clearly the future. We need to move our manufacturing from a steam-based operations to an electrical-based operation. So for those of you who are like not into history like I am, the way like steam manufacturing works is you basically have like a huge steam turbine. It turns like a huge pulley, and there's ropes on the ceilings that move around, and then like different equipment attaches to that giant pulley that uses the rotational force of the pulley. So there's two ways to like adopt electricity. Way number one is like, cool, I'm going to replace the steam engine with an electrical engine, and it's just going to spin and drive the pulleys around. That's option A. Option B is like, no, I'm going to tear up the pulleys. The cool thing about electricity is that it's a wire, and I can put the wire anywhere, and I can reimagine how my manufacturing floor looks like, and I can make it flexible. So if I need to switch from one type of thing to another thing, that's very, very easy because I can plug in my equipment anywhere. Turns out Group A did not survive. They all basically like died off up until 1930, or if not by 1930, they definitely died off in the Great Depression. And the folks who say like, no, we're going to go with option B, we're going to reimagine what the manufacturing flow looks like. Those are the companies that survived the Great Depression. And the analogy for the AI movement, it's a little bit similar. Folks that we are seeing that just like, hey, here's an AI tool, apply to your existing process, at best we're seeing like a 5% improvement in efficiency, right? But folks who take a step back and say like, well, look, we organized this work in a world where we didn't have AI. Let's take a step back and reimagine how this work actually needs to look like now that we have AI. Those are the folks that are seeing like upwards of 30 or 40% increase in efficiency.
Okay, so I love this analogy, and I've used it like 20 times since you shared it with me. I credit you about half the time. The other half, I
there's a famous book I wrote about it. I didn't come up with it.
I was going to give you credit. Okay, so here's the question, and let me kind of peel it apart just a little bit more. That was my banana peeling, hand signal. By basically reinforcing these old patterns that worked for old technology, you basically fail. Like you basically carry bias along with you. So we've been seeing a lot of tool bloat over the last 10 years. So there's so many tech tools. And we are seeing a lot of AI deployments where like, oh, I'm just going to add some AI add-ons, features to this tool that I already bought. And we didn't prep this, so you can pass on this question. What tools are not companies? I'll keep you out of purgatory that way. But what tools are going to survive, and what tools are not, and what legacy tools should they be thinking about, and then how should they be using those kind of tools? Again, this was unprepped, so blame me if this was I was thinking about it, and I think it's a really interesting question for everybody.
No, so this is a hot take, and off the cuff.
Yeah.
The history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, right? So let's first examine what is interesting about this new generative AI moment we find ourselves in is we now have these AI models that are really, really good at taking unstructured data and making reasonably good decisions on their own, if you prompt them and you do good context engineering. So what that means, the tools that are going to be most successful are the tools that can access where the context exists today, right? So if and the problem is for a lot of companies, because of the explosion of SaaS tools, the context tends to be spread across a whole bunch of different sources. So the best tools, are actually going to be able to figure out a way how to attach it. But some companies are going the opposite direction, saying well, if all this context is so important, I'm going to try to build a tool that goes across the entire stack. So you're seeing some of the kind of big rev tech players of the last decade, they all used to have their own lanes or what they used to be really, really good at. And then in 2023, they all decided to have the same strategy, which is we're going to do everything everywhere all at once, because they realize how important this data context is in order to make a good decision everywhere in the chain. So first, the successful ones are going to be the ones that can dynamically access data where it is. The ones that rely on you pulling the data in once, and then now you have it, that's going to be really, really hard.
Because it becomes invalid the minute you have it. Right?
Exactly. It's just old, it's stale, it's not up to date.
Yep.
The second thing, I think, and this is where it kind of rhymes with the SaaS generation, the first wave of SaaS startups were very, very opinionated about what your process needs to look like. And this includes Salesforce, right? No, this is the way you manage it. We're going to set it up for you. There's one way and one way to do it only. And if you look at the most successful SaaS companies, ServiceNow, Salesforce, what they all figured out is no, we shouldn't dictate what the flow looks like. We should give people building blocks, and then if they need to configure it so it matches how they actually work, that's going to make the SaaS application way better. I think it's the same with the AI tools of today. The ones that are too opinionated about how AI adds value, they're just going to they're not going to fit well for the process of your company. The ones that make it easy to configure it and tweak it so it matches your process are the ones that are going to do really, really well.
Okay, I got to go take some notes because no, but that's super interesting. Now, you also said something in one of our previous calls that you're predicting that we're going to see some of the companies who do have data start to hoard it. Tell me your thoughts here.
So I'm seeing a little bit of this, not a lot, and it's usually a private equity owned company who is kind of desperate for extra cash. Because with the SaaSification of the enterprise, you have all of these balkanized domains of data. Now all of them now have learned that they have to have API access, otherwise you'll never get past through the CIO procurement process. What some of them are beginning to do is actually jack up the prices of the API to get the data out, right? And part of the reason they're doing that is they're trying to favor their own built-in AI features that usually aren't as good. And companies are well, your AI features are just really not good. One CTO of a big SaaS company says it's a little bit like AI that picks socks for you in the morning. It does a pretty good job, but it's a pretty low value use case. It takes me 10 seconds to pick my socks. The fact that it does a really good job for me isn't that helpful. So they're trying to privilege themselves by saying well, you should use my AI tools because ultimately it's going to be cheaper, because building yourself or piping into a different tool that can do a better job, I'm going to make it more expensive by adding a toll that says hey, every API call is $1 or something egregious like that. And I think you may get a cash benefit from that
in the short term.
Years. At some point, people are going to be get out. I'm switching you out.
And those are the tools, as we're talking about tools to avoid. Those are tools to be really careful of, because those are not that's not where we want to land.
Yeah, I like how you're going into the, like, what does this mean for folks who are thinking about this? Like, think really hard as you're picking tools. Pay a lot of attention to, like, what is their ingest and export API policy. Like, what can you ingest and export?
Yeah.
So not only should you be able to export the ultimate outcome, that's a no-go. Ideally, if there's an AI solution, it should share its thinking traces so others can benefit from, like, not just like what the final outcome was.
So go all the way the opposite way. Open it up.
Exactly. So those are going to be the best ones.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is you want to be really, really careful of tools that demand that you load all the data in. You really want to have tools that are able to plug into your existing data systems, because that way you have control of your data assets for your company. And all of these different, AI employees of the future, you want to be able to control the data foundation from which they all draw their data, right?
Their basis. Their basis.
Loading it in once, it's clumsy. And it creates like a lock-in that's just not good.
Okay. There's so much here. This is so good. Okay. I have two more things before we run out of time. This is even better than our previous conversation. So I'm just like, okay, make sure we are recording this, everybody. So tell me about how to pilot. If people are listening, this is like, you saw the MIT study, people are failing at a massive rate right now. So how do people not do that?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And especially because we've seen so many pilots, especially in the first 2 years, we have a lot of data on like what goes well versus what doesn't go well. So first on that MIT study, I feel like it's deeply misunderstood. If you actually read it, which is kind of hard because it's hard to get access to it. You have to like submit the paperwork to get the research report. What it says, if you look at the data, is that a small portion of companies even made it to the point where they're actually piloting a tool, right? Only about, if you think about the task-specific Gen AI, only about 20% of companies have gotten to the point where they're piloting a tool, and then 5% of those, got a successful implementation. So what that means is that like your pilot to successful scale ratio is 25%, which guess what? It's been 25% since 2015. Since the big data ML, like it's always been that. It's like no different, right?
All right. So it's a bit of hype. Some of this study is a little bit of hyperbole here.
Well, it's hyperbole, and we agree with it. Like we do agree that 75% of pilots are failing because they're usually not set up right. So, which is kind of like what your question was. So, like, in what way are they not set up well? So, one thing that a lot of them kind of get wrong is like they're not thinking long and hard enough about like the leading and lagging KPIs that you want to measure to even decide is this pilot successful? Like the two most common KPIs I see being measured for those that like don't work out well at scale is like some sort of satisfaction of the tool from the people that are supposed to use it, like a CSAT or NPS. And then the second one tends to be just like, well, how much usage are we getting? Like how many people are using it or how many hours per day are they using it? And they're good. You should collect those. That's a prerequisite. Without that, you have nothing. But you really, as you pick your pilots, you should have a very clear, almost like a mechanistic idea of like, this tool does that, it impacts this. As a result, this leading API gets better. And then this, slightly more lagging KPI gets better. And then, here's the ultimate outcome on revenue or cost, depending on what I'm targeting, right? So that becomes really, really important. Because
if you don't start with that, you're kind of cooked, right? Like, but they don't. They're like, let's see if it works. Those are the pilots we're seeing are like, this is neat. Let's try it. But you're saying you can't. You have, which is, by the way, like any project 101. What's the success criteria? Like, what's the measurement of success?
Yeah, and I've seen some of my clients who've done this really, really well on purpose. Choose a use case that maybe has like a lower theoretical upside, but there's a more direct linkage between like what you are doing and the impact that you're getting. So,
I see.
People would call it like, attributable incremental revenue or attributable, incremental cost savings, right? So, if you think about, let's say agentic lead discovery and prioritization, right? Like, I'm trying to get the top of the funnel better with an AI employee, the leading KPI may be like email open rates or like MQL to SQL conversion rate or something like that. The lagging KPI is going to be like, what is the revenue I got from the prioritized, not. But the leading ones are going to be, things that you can measure very, very quickly,
Okay.
such that you get a strong signal that then like teaches you how to tweak your pilot, because your first version of the pilot is never going to be great.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So that's one big pitfall. Second big pitfall I see for folks who like move from pilot to scale and they get super disappointed, which actually happens a lot, is that they actually try to scale too quickly. I call it blitz scaling. They see it work in a small group. They get really excited. This is amazing. Look at all these leading KPIs that are getting better.
Let's go.
We should give to this entire organization at once. And here's the issue. Like what makes AI so valuable is that they're so great at handling like vague instructions and handling unstructured data and all of this stuff. What that means is all of a sudden the surface area of edge cases you haven't contemplated has exploded. And if you now give this to every single BU in the entire organization at once, the organization that built that use case is going to get inundated and be like, oh my God, it didn't work for me here, it didn't work for me here. And then people are just going to like try it once, give up, and move on. People who do this really, really well, they prove it out like one BU or one area, and then they kind of scale it slowly
Another
over
one,
time.
and then another, and then just slowly ease into it.
Learn like what is different about that content generation system for this particular view versus that one. Certainly the systems you draw from are different. Maybe the buyers are different, so you have to rewrite the prompts for the personas. Maybe the orchestration that you use is different, and you want to contemplate all of that.
That makes sense. Okay, so related to that, what's the easiest use case where you see success? Like what should people, if they're going to start, there's a lot of people here who've tried something that probably failed, and it usually was they bought some tool that they're like, oh, I'm going to try this. When we spoke, you were like, don't start with the tool, start with the strategy, like start with the objective. So what's the right, like from your standpoint, your experience, what are the objectives? What are the departments? What are the processes that are working?
Yeah. So with the caveat that usually just one thing rarely can create a ton of value, but there are some things that like generally do work, and they could be the core around which you build like an end-to-end workflow of AI employees or AI agents or AI use cases. So the first one is in kind of targeting and knowing who you should go after and kind of like prioritizing your prospect clients. And like one of the cool ways that Gen AI helps is we've been building propensity models for like a decade. We're pretty good at it, but they tend to use structured data, like what industry,
Okay.
like how much are they growing, stuff like that. Things that are like really easy to feed into an ML model. What has now changed with Gen AI, like unstructured data can become a great signal of like a need that you can now feed into that model, and you'll find that the accuracy gets way better.
Okay.
Right? You can read news articles about this company and be like, this could be a good signal that they need me. Or if you're selling software, you can see like what kind of employees are they hiring and what does that tell me about the tech stack that they have. Things of that nature, when added to the targeting models, tends to make them a lot better. So what that means is that the salespeople that use them, all of a sudden, the pipeline that they're getting is just higher quality, and they're spending more time on higher quality deals.
So like, is that something a vendor would be bringing in for you? Is it something you should be asking your vendor to be doing it? Should they, like, as you build, because you're built, like, by the way, for everybody listening, Sanjin is like one of the strange human beings who understands the strategy and actually builds it. He delivers it. So he's both strategic and very hands-on. Like, how do they, it sounds like what you say sounds amazing. How do they actually do it?
Yeah. So I haven't yet seen an off-the-shelf tool that can do this completely automatically, but you can you can sort of hack it your way, even using generalist tools like, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, or maybe one of those workflow tools like N8N. But the idea is that like you want to have like a very clear logic around like, what kind of unstructured text data source could be a good source of intent for my industry, for my product, that if I had 1,000 free interns who could do a reasonably good job, I would
make
give
them just go do it
all day long. And then you just write a prompt and be like, hey, does this particular, so I'll give you a very real example. So this is something we did for like a company that sells like equipment for medical and bioscience research. They did really, really well with pharma companies, not as well with like medium and small size universities. And we realized that actually like most of the funding for research for this medium and small size university comes from like government grants. And because it's the government, they have to tell you who they give the grant to. So we created an agent that actually reads every single grant and says like, hey, how likely is it that in order to perform research in this grant, you will need physical equipment that like we make and sell. And then that kind of narrows it down and say, cool, like, well, which of our equipment would be most appropriate to do this kind of research? Because these abstracts are like pages and pages long. They have a lot of information about what they're going to do. And then you say, cool, well, these people just got, $1 million, because it's also going to tell you how much money they have. Like, it seems like they definitely have a need. We should probably reach out to them. And then, like, so the first time we did it is like the salespeople were overwhelmed with how many new leads they were getting. So we wrote a second AI agent or AI employee that actually proactively write an email like, hey, congratulations on this amazing Alzheimer's research grant. By the way, did you know they have this microscope? It's really good for doing that kind of research.
Amazing.
Let me know. And immediately the pipeline like grew like tremendously overnight.
So that's an amazing example. Did they, and this is something we learned in my old inside sales days, that the sales rep intuitively knew where the signals were. How did you find that signal? Did your team know, like, oh, this happens, and then you were able to then say, oh, we can do this at scale, actually, and we can automate this whole thing? Like, how did you discover that?
The reps knew it, and they tried to do this.
They knew it, right? They knew it.
Yeah, but they couldn't do it, right? Because like each week, the government does like 1,000 or even 10,000 grants per week. And you kind of have to hire people who have PhD in biomedical research to like understand, like, is this a meta study? Is this like it's just uneconomical to do this in a world where you have to pay like a PhD to do this work. But guess what? With an LLM, reading each grant was like less than a cent.
It's a piece of cake. Yeah, it's a piece of cake. Yeah. So this is, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So like, this is actually a really interesting point. It's like some of the most successful use cases I've seen in go-to-market, they're not about efficiency. They're not about cost. They're actually about doing net new things you never did before because you couldn't, and now you can. Because the problem with the efficiency ones is the immediate knee-jerk reaction is anxiety, like this is coming after my job, and the change management becomes really, really hard.
100%.
If instead your use cases are all about like, how do I make the seller's job easier? How do I make the marketing job easier? People are like, hell yes, tell me more. I want to hear.
100%. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, we could stop right now. We have 3 or 4 more minutes, but we literally could stop with that one point. Your people probably already know where that data is. They probably already know what it is, but they just can't do it. It's either too difficult, there's not enough time. So again, we didn't talk about that before, but like, again, I'm taking notes here. Okay. Is there any like framework that you recommend? I mean, it's so early. Is there a method? Is there a framework that you like to prescribe to?
I mean, one thing we always think about is like, don't think about an individual use case. Think about the workflow and think about the KPI that you're trying to do. Like, what is your biggest bottleneck? And the reason why I want to think about the end-to-end portfolio of use cases is like, if you just solve one, a new bottleneck emerges somewhere else, right? So like that's like one thing. The second thing is it's less of a framework, but more like I call them like, the 6 hard truths. And if you don't buy into them, you're going to have a hard time getting real value. So like one of them is like, you need to think about a portfolio. The second one is like bottoms up experimentation is valuable. It doesn't really create value at scale. It's a good way of identifying like promising areas. But the reason why it doesn't work at scale is because you rely on the front line to do the prompt engineering and context engineering. And most people are just not good at it. So you can use experimentation to identify cool things, but then hire experts who know how to build a solution around
it. How to really do this. Yeah.
Yeah. The third thing we already talked about, it's like, if you apply AI to existing process, you're going to get micro productivity. Like oftentimes you want to rethink how the work should be done.
Okay.
4, data. Like the kind of data AI needs is not the kind of data that you've typically like even collected or governed. So spend a lot of time thinking about like, what is the golden truth of data I will need to ground this agent in to do a good job.
Okay.
And then like, the last one is kind of like, how do you pilot well? Is like one is on the KPIs and the other one is like not getting too excited.
We hit some of these things. That's amazing.
And then the last thing I'm going to say, like, as you're trying to pick between like cost savings or revenue, if you're a big company with lots of sellers or marketers, like let's say 1,000 plus, you can get value with efficiency and cost. If it's less than 1,000 people, it's going to be really, really hard because you're going to have to string so many different things.
There's just not enough there. Yeah.
To get the impact. So like for most people, actually going after like increasing revenue and increasing effectiveness tends to work better.
Okay. That's boy, we could talk about so many things. So, okay, just a couple, I think a minute or two. Where do you see? So like, tilt to the future, like be a prophet for us here, a little prognostication. Where do you think things are going in the next let's even just say 6 to 12 months. Like we can't go too far out. Like I pushed you at one point, like 5 years, and you're like, I don't know, like the moon.
Anybody who claims they do are delusional or lying.
I know. So like, 6 to 12 months, where is it going to land?
I think in the next 6 to 12 months, you will see a lot more folks realize that you can't just take things off the shelf. You're either going to have to like do the bespoke work yourself, or like a lot of success we're seeing is like, take a startup that does this well and use their forward deployed engineers to customize their solution for you. Those are the folks that are getting a lot. So I think that's going to like pick up a lot of steam going forward. I think the other thing that's going to pick up a lot of steam is like the need to create these API connections between the different systems and create a core data asset.
Kind of access,
and that's
the real-time data access. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then past the 12 months, I think what people are not thinking, like maybe this is the 12 to 24 months, a lot of marketers and sellers keep thinking like, how can we use AI to do a better job? What you will need to start thinking in 6 to 12 months is like, you should assume that your customer is also using AI as part of the research and buying process. So how do you need to tweak your selling process to match the fact that
to have the AIs work together? Okay, we're going to have you on another session at some point because I want to explore that concept. Okay, guys, this has been an amazing session. One of my favorites. Let's pull Gabe on. Look, before Gabe, Gabe and I have a little bit of like an ego battle. So like, I don't want him to talk yet. How do people reach out and ask you questions? Like if they want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Oh, just like reach out on LinkedIn or like my email is fairly obvious. It's sanjin.bicanic@bain.com. It couldn't be simpler than that.
Yep, perfect.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
That's cool. Thanks.
Thank you for doing it. Like,
thank you for doing this. It's really cool.
Thank you for doing this. This is amazing. I can't wait to see all of it.
Yeah, Gabe, just remember what he just said.
Yeah,
I think he said I'm amazing. Okay, he didn't say that.
I appreciate it, Sanjin. We'll let you drop. So thank you again.